The brilliant Arizona sunlight poured down on the Tesla showroom in Phoenix, making the building's glass facade sparkle like a gem in the desert. Inside, the cool air from the air conditioning mingled with the soft chatter of sharply dressed salespeople, busy attending to customers who looked unmistakably wealthy. Polished Tesla cars were displayed like works of art, drawing everyone's gaze, except for one man standing quietly in the corner, wearing a simple black baseball cap and faded jeans. No one paid him any attention, and that was exactly what he wanted. That man was Elon Musk, the world-famous billionaire, but today, he didn't want his spotlight to overshadow his true purpose, to see how his company treated customers when no one knew who he was. Elon took a sip of his coffee, his sharp eyes scanning every detail. He was used to numbers, reports, and praise from his top executives, but today he wanted the truth, the unfiltered truth, free from PowerPoint slides or flattery. He stood there, silent as a ghost, a mix of curiosity and unease stirring within him. Tesla wasn't just a company to him, it was a dream, a promise of a better future. But if even the most ordinary people weren't treated well here, what was that dream worth? Then his gaze landed on an older man who had just stepped through the front door. He wore a neatly pressed shirt, slightly worn khakis, and his white hair was combed with care. In his hands, he clutched a small notebook, his thin fingers gripping it like it was his last treasure. Hector Ramirez, a name Elon didn't yet know, but the sight of him instantly caught his attention. There was something about Hector that made Elon's heart skip a beat. The humility in his slow steps, the awe in his eyes as he looked at the cars, and a fleeting sadness Elon couldn't quite place. Hector approached the reception desk, his voice soft but clear. "Excuse me, I'd like to see a car, if that's okay." The young receptionist glanced up from her computer screen, her eyes flicking over him for a split second before returning to her work. "Someone will help you shortly," she replied in a flat, disinterested tone. Hector nodded, offering a polite smile, then stepped back, his hands clasped as if to steady his nerves. He began wandering the showroom, his eyes lighting up as he paused before each car. His trembling fingers hovered over the glossy paint but never touched, as if he feared tarnishing something too far beyond his world. Elon watched from a distance, a growing unease settling in his chest. He saw Hector raise a hand whenever a salesperson passed by, but no one stopped. Young couples in expensive clothes, businessmen with sleek leather briefcases, they arrived after Hector, but were greeted warmly right away. Meanwhile, Hector waited patiently, his thin shoulders trembling slightly under the bright white lights. 30 minutes passed, then an hour. He'd circled the showroom 3 times, sat briefly on a bench, then stood again, trying to catch someone's attention. But no one noticed him. Hector didn't know that each of his slow steps was etching a deepening disappointment into Elon's mind. Elon gripped his coffee cup tighter, the heat from it not enough to thaw the cold spreading through him. This wasn't the Tesla he'd built. This wasn't a place where everyone, rich or poor, was welcomed to experience the future. A quiet anger simmered inside him, not at Hector, but at his own team. Yet beyond the anger was curiosity. Who was this man? Why was he here, so patient, when he clearly didn't fit the typical Tesla customer mold? Finally, Hector stopped. His shoulders slumped, the earlier spark in his eyes dulled by disappointment. He looked at the notebook in his hands, sighed softly, and closed it. That was the moment he gave up, not out of anger, but because he was too tired to keep hoping. He turned and shuffled toward the exit, each step carrying a story Elon didn't yet understand. But he knew he couldn't let him leave like that. "Sir!" Elon called out, his voice cutting through the showroom's quiet hum, startling a few heads to turn. He set his coffee down and strode across the polished floor, his heart pounding. Hector turned back, his eyes widening in surprise. "Do you need help with something?" Elon asked, keeping his tone steady despite the urgency surging inside him, an urgency he couldn't quite explain. Hector smiled, a gentle, genuine smile that softened the lines on his face. "Yes," he said, his voice raspy but warm. "I'd like to see a car. The Model 3, I think." He hesitated, as if afraid he'd asked for too much. Elon felt a warmth spread through his chest. There was something about Hector, his simplicity, his sincerity, that reminded him of his own early days when he was just a dreamer no one believed in. "I'd be happy to help you," he replied, smiling back. "I'm Ed." The fake name slipped out naturally. He didn't want his fame to change this moment. He wanted it to be real, like the man standing before him. "Thank you, Ed. I'm Hector. Hector Ramirez," he said, extending his hand. Elon took it, feeling the faint but resolute strength in Hector's grip. It was the start of a story neither of them could have foreseen. A story that would not only change their lives, but touch millions of others. The white light from the showroom's ceiling fixtures bathed the glossy floor, casting a faint reflection of Hector Ramirez as he slowly shuffled toward the exit. His thin shoulders slumped, the small notebook in his hand gripped so tightly that his knuckles turned white. He had waited over an hour, patient to the point of near despair, yet not a single employee had stopped to assist him. Now, disappointment weighed down each step, dragging along a sadness he tried to hide behind the polite smile he'd worn earlier. Hector wasn't angry. He wasn't the type to hold grudges, but he felt a cold emptiness in his chest, where hope had flickered when he first walked in. All he wanted was to see a Tesla Model 3, to touch his grandson Miguel's dream just once before his time ran out. Behind him, Elon Musk stood in silence, his keen eyes tracking the older man's every move. The coffee in his hand had long gone cold, but he didn't notice. All he felt now was a complex surge of emotions roiling within him: anger at his team, curiosity about Hector, and an intense urge he couldn't yet name. He'd watched this scene unfold for too long. Hector ignored, rendered invisible amid the well-dressed crowd, and each passing minute only deepened the sense of failure gnawing at him. This wasn't the Tesla he'd envisioned, not a place where everyone was welcome to experience the future. As Hector turned to leave, his eyes clouded with resignation, Elon knew he couldn't stand by any longer. "Sir!" His voice rang out, slicing through the showroom's quiet hum, louder and more resolute than he'd intended. Hector paused and turned, his eyes widening in surprise. Elon set his coffee down on a nearby table and strode across the floor, his heart pounding in his chest. He wasn't sure exactly what he'd say, but he knew he had to act. "Do you need help with something?" he asked, softening his tone despite the urgency churning inside him. Hector hesitated, then a gentle smile spread across his weathered face. "Yes," he replied, his voice raspy but warm, as if he couldn't believe someone had finally noticed him. "I'd like to see a car. The Model 3, I think." He dipped his head slightly, as if worried his request was too grand, too out of place for his modest appearance. Elon felt a warmth bloom in his chest. There was something about Hector, his sincerity, his humility, that reminded him of his own early days, when he was just a dreamer mocked by the world. "I'd be happy to help you," he said, returning the smile. "I'm Ed." The fake name slipped out effortlessly. He didn't want his fame to alter this moment. He wanted it to be real, to understand the man before him without any barriers. "Thank you, Ed. I'm Hector. Hector Ramirez," he said, extending his hand. Elon took it, feeling the faint but steady strength in Hector's grip. It was a handshake that carried a lifetime. Years of labor, simple joys, and unspoken pain he couldn't yet see. "The Model 3 is right over here," Elon said, guiding Hector toward a gleaming white car in the center of the showroom. "It's our most affordable model, but still packed with amazing features." Hector's eyes lit up as they approached the vehicle. "It's beautiful," he whispered, his voice trembling with awe. "Can I look inside?" "Of course," Elon replied, opening the door for him. "Feel free to sit in the driver's seat." Hector stepped in carefully, his thin hands brushing the steering wheel, and a radiant smile broke across his face. "This is something else," he said, his eyes sparkling like a child discovering magic. "My grandson would lose his mind over this." Elon leaned against the door, curiosity piqued. "You have a grandson who likes Teslas?" Hector nodded, his smile softening with a trace of sadness. "Miguel. He's 12, smart as a whip, and obsessed with everything Sorry, what's your name again?" "Ed," Elon repeated, keeping his voice steady, though his heart beat faster. "So your grandson's a fan of electric cars?" "Electric cars, solar panels, space rockets, you name it. He loves it all," Hector said with a small laugh. "He's got Tesla posters plastered all over his bedroom. Says you're going to save the world." Elon felt a warmth spread through him, as if those words reached a deep part of him, the reason he'd started all this. "And you came here today to see a car for him?" he asked, his tone gentle but attentive. Hector's smile faded, his gaze drifting somewhere far off. "Not to buy?" he said, his voice lowering. "I can't afford it. I drove a bus for 40 years before retiring. I just wanted to see it up close, maybe take a few pictures to show him." He patted the notebook in his pocket, then dropped his voice like he was sharing a secret. "Truth is, I don't have much time left. Cancer. Doctors gave me 6 months, maybe less." He touched his chest. "It's in my lungs, and it's spreading." Elon's throat tightened. He'd met thousands of people, heard countless stories, but Hector's words hit him like a punch to the gut. He fought to keep his expression steady, but inside, a torrent of emotions churned. Shock, sorrow, and admiration for Hector's calm resolve. "I'm so sorry to hear that," he said, his voice rough despite his efforts. "Don't be," Hector replied, his tone surprisingly firm. "I've had a good life, but before I go, I made a promise to Miguel. I told him I'd get him a ride in a Tesla." Hector ran his hand lightly over the dashboard, his eyes distant, as if seeing Miguel right there. "He lives in Boston with my daughter. I don't see him as much as I'd like. He loves these cars because they're good for the earth. He's always talking about the future, that kid. I want him to know his old man believes in that future too, even if I won't be here to see it." Elon turned his head briefly, pretending to survey the showroom to mask the emotions welling up. He'd heard endless praise, but no one's words had ever struck him so profoundly. Hector wasn't seeking pity or personal gain. He just wanted to leave something for his grandson. A memory, a belief. "Let me show you how the screen works," Elon said, leaning into the car and tapping the large central display, trying to regain his composure. He began explaining the features, his voice warming as he watched Hector listen intently, scribbling careful notes in his little book. They spent nearly 20 minutes by the car, and with each passing minute, Elon felt something shift inside him. Hector wasn't just a forgotten customer. He embodied everything Elon had hoped Tesla would bring: hope, inspiration, and a future worth living for. When Hector asked, how much would it cost to rent one of these for a day, his voice tinged with hope and worry. Elon didn't get a chance to answer before a sharp voice cut in. "Excuse me, what are you doing?" Derek, a salesman with slicked back hair and a tight-fitting suit, approached, his cold gaze fixed on Hector. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you not to touch the displays unless you're serious about buying," Derek said, his tone dripping with condescension. Elon felt his blood boil. He'd seen enough. The Tesla showroom in Phoenix suddenly fell into an odd stillness, broken only by the steady hum of the air conditioning and the soft shuffle of Hector Ramirez's footsteps as he sat inside the gleaming white Model 3. The light from the overhead fixtures poured down, illuminating the gentle smile on his face as he ran a frail, trembling hand over the steering wheel, overcome with quiet emotion. Beside him, Elon Musk, under the alias Ed, leaned into the car, explaining the features on the central touchscreen with a rare enthusiasm. He felt a simple joy spreading through him, as if talking with Hector was rekindling a part of himself he'd long forgotten. The pure passion of sharing his dream with someone who genuinely cherished it. Hector listened intently, his eyes lighting up with each new detail Elon pointed out. The autopilot system, the energy efficiency, or how the car could sync with solar power. He scribbled carefully in his small notebook, his shaky handwriting deliberate and clear, as if he were trying to capture every moment to bring back to Miguel. "How much would it cost to rent one of these for a day?" Hector asked, his voice laced with hope and a hint of worry, as though he were mentally calculating whether his life's savings could make his grandson's dream come true. Elon opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, a sharp, icy voice sliced through the warm exchange between them. "Excuse me, what are you doing?" Derek, a salesman with meticulously gelled hair and a tight-fitting suit, strode over, his narrowed eyes fixed on Hector with scrutiny. He didn't even glance at Elon, his tone dripping with arrogance, as if Hector were an uninvited intruder. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you not to touch the displays unless you're actually planning to buy." Hector flinched, the smile vanishing from his lips. He bowed his head, his hands quickly pulling away from the steering wheel, as if caught doing something wrong. "I was just," he stammered, his voice trembling with embarrassment. Elon felt a rush of heat flood his face, a simmering anger igniting in his chest. He turned to Derek, forcing his voice to stay calm, though each word came out edged like a blade. "I'm showing my friend here the car's features," he said, emphasizing "friend" as a warning Derek clearly didn't catch. Derek finally spared Elon a glance, but it was fleeting, as if he weren't worth the attention. "These cars are expensive," Derek pressed on, his condescending tone unwavering as he turned back to Hector. "This isn't a museum for people to play around in. Are you planning to buy one today?" Hector's face flushed, his hands clutching the notebook tighter for comfort. "No, he began, but Derek cut him off instantly. "Then I'm afraid I'll have to ask you to get out of the car. We have serious customers waiting." Elon glanced around the showroom. 3 other employees were clustered near the reception desk, laughing carelessly, while only 2 other customers quietly browsed cars in a far corner. "I think we're fine here," he said, his voice now carrying a chilling edge that anyone familiar with Elon would recognize as the calm before a storm. Derek finally turned to him fully, this time looking closer, his brows knitting with suspicion. "And who are you exactly?" he demanded, his tone a mix of challenge and disdain. In that moment, Elon felt everything inside him erupt, not just anger at Derek, but a profound disappointment in his own company, in how his dream had been twisted by people like this. He straightened up, pulling off his baseball cap to reveal the face the world knew instantly. "I'm Elon Musk," he said, his voice steady but brimming with authority. "I believe I own this company." Derek's face drained of color, as if the blood had fled his body entirely. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Only the faint crash of someone's coffee cup shattering on the floor somewhere in the showroom. Hector looked up, his eyes wide with shock, darting between Elon and Derek, unable to process what had just happened. The room fell deathly silent, every gaze snapping toward them, phones raised to capture the unbelievable moment. Derek stammered, scrambling for an explanation. "Mr. Musk, I didn't know," he managed, his voice quaking, his face now flushed with shame and panic. Elon didn't reply, just stared at him, not with fury, but with a disappointment so piercing it made Derek feel smaller than ever. He turned to Hector, still seated in the car, his trembling hands clutching the notebook like it was the only thing holding him together. "Mr. Ramirez," Elon said, his voice softening with deep sincerity, "I'm sorry for this mix-up." Hector blinked, still reeling. "It's okay," he whispered, his voice faint but forgiving. He started to slide out of the driver's seat, his legs shaky as they touched the floor. "I should go. I don't want to cause trouble." But Elon placed a hand on his shoulder, gentle yet firm. "Please stay," he said. "We're not done looking at the car." Those words weren't just an invitation. They were a promise. Elon felt a fierce responsibility welling up inside him, not just for Hector, but for Miguel, the boy he'd spoken of with such love and hope. He couldn't let this moment end in failure. Couldn't let Hector walk away empty-handed after opening up to him. As the crowd began to murmur and the showroom manager stumbled out of his office in a frantic rush toward Elon, he guided Hector to a quieter corner, the manager's office, where they could talk undisturbed. When the door closed, Hector sank into a chair, his eyes still dazed. "You're really Elon Musk?" he asked, his voice trembling with disbelief. Elon smiled, feeling a rare lightness for the first time that day. "Yes, it's me, and I'm so sorry for what just happened. That's not how my company should work." Hector shook his head. "It's fine. I just didn't expect—" He trailed off, unsure what to say next. Elon sat across from him, his gaze serious yet warm. "You told me about Miguel," he said, "about your promise to him." Hector nodded, his eyes brightening at the mention of his grandson. "He's everything to me," he said, his voice catching. "I just wanted to do something for him before I—" He didn't finish, but Elon understood. "Mr. Ramirez." "Hector," Elon corrected himself, his tone softening. "I'm going to do something special for Miguel. Not just a test drive. Something bigger. I promise you." Hector stared at him, his eyes misting with emotion. "Why?" he asked, his voice shaking. "You don't have to. You don't even know me." Elon paused, then answered, "Because sometimes life isn't fair, but we can make it better when we get the chance." He took Hector's hand, feeling the fragile yet resilient strength in his grip. It was the start of a journey beyond anything either of them could imagine. A journey of kindness, hope, and lasting change. The brilliant California sun blazed down on the sprawling Tesla headquarters, where modern buildings intertwined with greenery created a scene both serene and brimming with energy. Hector Ramirez sat in his wheelchair, his frail hands gripping the armrests tightly, the pain in his chest momentarily overshadowed by an indescribable excitement. He had endured a risky flight from Phoenix to be here, not for himself, but for Miguel, his beloved grandson, who he knew would never forget this day. Beside him, Elon Musk walked with a confident yet contemplative stride, his eyes lighting up whenever they met Hector's, as if the older man were the inspiration for everything about to unfold. When the Model X carrying Hector's family pulled up in front of a building marked Authorized Personnel Only, Miguel practically leaped out, his 12-year-old eyes wide with exhilaration. Valeria, Miguel's mother, followed behind, her face a mix of worry and awe at the opulence and thoughtfulness surrounding them. Ruth, Hector's close neighbor, was there too, her eyes glistening as she watched the smile spread across her old friend's face. This was the moment Hector had dreamed of, not for himself but for Miguel, and now it was coming true, surpassing even his wildest imaginings. Elon stood by the building's entrance, hands in his pockets, a gentle smile playing on his lips as he took in the family. "Good morning," he called, his voice warm yet commanding. "I hope you all slept well." Miguel could barely contain himself, his voice ringing out brightly. "Yes, Mr. Musk." Elon chuckled, bending down to shake the boy's hand. "Call me Elon," he said, then turned to Hector. "How are you feeling today?" Hector offered a faint smile, masking the dull ache simmering in his chest. "Ready for the big reveal," he replied, his eyes brightening as they shifted to Miguel. Elon nodded, sensing what Hector left unsaid, that he was pouring every ounce of his remaining strength into witnessing his grandson's joy. He turned to the group, his tone growing serious yet inspiring. "What you're about to see today is special. We've been working tirelessly to make it happen." Hector told me about Miguel's passion for sustainable energy and Tesla cars. That kind of dedication to the planet's future deserves encouragement, especially in someone as young as him. Miguel glanced at his grandfather, his eyes round with astonishment. Hector took the boy's hand, giving it a gentle squeeze, his heart pounding with pride. Elon placed his hand on a scanner by the door, and with a soft beep, the heavy steel door slid open. "Miguel," he said, his eyes twinkling, "your grandfather wanted to give you something special for your birthday. This is a gift from both of us." As the door fully opened, brilliant white light spilled out, illuminating a vast space within. Miguel stepped forward, then froze, his mouth falling open in disbelief. At the center of the room stood a metallic blue Tesla Model 3, but it wasn't just any car. The name Miguel was etched along its side in electric blue, glowing like a pulse of living energy. Surrounding it was an elaborate display: solar panels, battery storage systems, and interactive screens showcasing renewable energy data. A miniature science museum with the Tesla as its crown jewel. Is it for me?" Miguel whispered, his voice trembling with disbelief. Elon grinned, ushering the group inside. "This is just the beginning. This is Miguel's clean energy package." He launched into an explanation, his voice brimming with enthusiasm. "The car's customized with accessibility features so your grandfather can get in and out easily. The solar panels and battery storage will be installed at your home in Boston, making it energy independent. And this," he gestured to the interactive screen, "is an educational system for you to track energy production, usage, and carbon savings. It's all in your hands." Miguel circled the car slowly, his small hands brushing its surface with reverence, as if afraid it might vanish like a dream. "But I can't drive yet," he said, his eyes a mix of confusion and delight. Elon chuckled. "Your mom will be the official owner until you're old enough, but one day, this will be yours." Valeria stood there, hand over her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. Ruth wiped away silent tears, her heart swelling with joy at seeing Hector witness this moment. "There's more," Elon continued, leading them to a table set for a surprise lunch. As they sat, he elaborated. "All of this, the car, the solar system, the educational package, is yours, Miguel. But there's one more thing. We've set up a special scholarship fund for you. When you're ready for college, it'll support you in studying renewable energy engineering, or whatever path you choose." Valeria finally spoke, her voice choked with emotion. "Mr. Musk, I don't know what to say. Why are you doing all this for us? We're strangers." Elon paused, his gaze settling on Hector, who watched Miguel quietly with a faint smile. "Your father reminded me of someone important in my life," he said, his voice lowering. "Sometimes, the right person showing up at the right time can change everything." Hector felt his heart skip a beat. He looked at Miguel, watching the boy explore the interactive screen with an engineer assigned as his guide. Miguel's joy was everything he'd ever wanted, not just the car, but the chance for him to dream bigger, to believe more fiercely in a future Hector wouldn't live to see. He wiped away a silent tear, not from sadness, but from overwhelming happiness. Elon pulled Hector aside to a quieter corner, while Miguel was occupied with the engineer. "How about we take the kid for a ride?" he suggested, his eyes glinting with mischief. Hector nodded, his heart racing with anticipation. Tomas, Hector's nurse, carefully helped him from the wheelchair into the Tesla's passenger seat, securing his oxygen tank. Miguel climbed into the back, his hands running over the premium leather, eyes wide as he stared at the massive screen. Elon slid into the driver's seat, pressed the start button, and the car hummed to life. "This isn't your average test drive," Elon said, grinning through the rearview mirror as they pulled out of the building. He took them through the Tesla campus, where employees lined the path waving hello, then into a demonstration area where the car's self-driving features shone. The vehicle navigated obstacles on its own, prompting Miguel to squeal with delight. He fired off questions non-stop, and Elon answered each one with patience and enthusiasm, as if nothing else mattered in that moment. Hector sat quietly, watching. He didn't say much, but every smile from Miguel, every spark in the boy's eyes, etched itself into his heart. Occasionally, he caught Elon's gaze in the rearview mirror, and in it was an unspoken understanding that this wasn't just a gift, but a legacy. When they returned to the building, Hector felt his body weary, but his soul lighter than ever. He'd seen Miguel's future take shape, and that was all he needed. As the group prepared to leave, Miguel ran over and threw his arms around Elon in a sudden hug that caught him off guard, but elicited a genuine smile as he hugged back. "This is the best day ever, Grandpa!" the boy shouted, grabbing Hector's hand. "Yes, mijo," Hector whispered, his heart full. "It sure is." The California sunset stretched across the sky, painting vivid streaks of orange mingled with soft pinks, its glow reflecting through the windows of the Advanced Research Division building at Tesla's headquarters. Hector Ramirez sat in his wheelchair, his thin hands gripping the armrests tightly, his breathing labored despite the oxygen tank's support. He had just endured an emotionally charged day, watching Miguel's joy over the customized Tesla Model 3, the solar energy system, and the scholarship fund Elon had gifted the boy. But now, in the quiet of this laboratory, a different feeling crept into Hector's heart. Curiosity, apprehension, and a fragile glimmer of hope he didn't dare fully embrace. Elon Musk walked beside him, his posture relaxed, yet his eyes betraying a deep pensiveness. He had led Hector and Tomas, his nurse, here after parting from the rest of the family, his voice lowering with significance as he said, "If you're not too tired, I'd like to show you one more thing, just you." Hector nodded, his eyes sparking with curiosity, despite his body's plea for rest. He didn't know what awaited, but after everything Elon had done, he trusted it would carry profound meaning. The lab doors slid open, revealing a vast space filled with scientists in white coats working at cutting-edge screens. At the center stood a sealed glass chamber housing equipment Hector didn't recognize, exuding an air of mystery and promise. A woman with short hair and thick glasses approached, her smile professional yet warm. "Mr. Musk," she greeted, then turned to Hector. "You must be Mr. Ramirez. I'm Dr. Harrison." Elon introduced her. "Dr. Harrison heads our medical research division." Hector frowned, surprise etching his weathered face. "Tesla does medical research?" he asked, his raspy voice thick with intrigue. Elon gave a faint smile, both enigmatic and genuine. "Not officially. This is a personal project I fund. Very few people know about it." Dr. Harrison guided them into a small meeting room, its walls covered with medical images, lungs, cellular tissue, microscopic structures that Hector instantly recognized as tied to his own illness. "Mr. Ramirez," Dr. Harrison began, her tone serious yet gentle. "Elon told me about your condition. Stage 4 lung cancer, metastasized to the liver, correct?" Hector nodded, the familiar weight of acceptance settling over him. He'd heard those words too many times from doctors in Phoenix, each time a stab reminding him his time was slipping away. But Harrison's eyes didn't carry the despair he'd seen in others. They held a spark of hope he'd never encountered before. Elon sat across from Hector, his hands clasped on the table, his gaze locked onto him. "Remember that night we talked at the hotel?" he asked. "The box I gave you. The watch." Hector nodded, recalling the small device on his wrist, which Elon had said tracked his heart rate and blood oxygen levels. "That wasn't the real gift I meant to talk about," Elon continued, his voice deepening with intent. He pulled out his phone, opened a screen filled with data and visuals, and handed it to Hector. "This is..." Hector peered at the screen, his eyes narrowing as he tried to make sense of what he saw. Complex diagrams, microscopic simulations, numbers he couldn't decipher. But as Dr. Harrison explained, clarity emerged. "This is an experimental targeted therapy combining nanotechnology with immunotherapy," she said, her voice confident yet cautious. "Unlike chemotherapy, which attacks all fast-growing cells, our approach uses nanobots to pinpoint cancer cells, delivering drugs directly to them without harming healthy tissue." Hector felt his heart beat faster, not from pain, but from a sensation he hadn't felt in ages, hope. Yet it came laced with fear that this was an illusion, that he'd be let down again as he had so many times before. "It's still in trials," Harrison went on, her tone honest but not cold. "We've succeeded in the lab and with animals, but human trials are just beginning. There are risks, and I can't promise it'll work." Elon watched Hector, his eyes earnest yet warm. "Why me?" Hector asked, his voice trembling with emotion and doubt. There must be others who need it more, who could benefit more. He thought of younger patients, those with whole lives ahead, not an old man like him who'd lived long enough to harbor no regrets. Elon paused, as if weighing each word. "When I met you at the showroom," he began, his voice low and heartfelt, "I saw something rare. A man facing death who didn't think of himself. You only thought of your grandson's happiness, of leaving something meaningful behind. We need people like you for these trials. People with courage, who understand that even if this doesn't save them, the data we gather could save millions in the future." Hector's throat tightened. Elon's words struck him not because of the praise, but because they echoed what he'd always believed, that his life mattered only if he left something better behind. "And if it doesn't work for me?" he asked, his voice dropping as he confronted his deepest fear. "Then you will spend your final days advancing a technology that could save millions," Harrison replied, her tone gentle yet resolute. "But if it works, even partially?" "I might get more time with Miguel," Hector whispered, finishing her thought. That idea, more time, hung between them, a small but fierce flame in the darkness. "I need to think," Hector said after a long silence, his gaze shifting to Elon. "And talk to Valeria." "Of course," Elon replied softly. "Dr. Harrison will give you all the information you need. Take your time." He rose, guiding Hector outside to a small beach nearby, a final stop he'd chosen for the day. As they sat on the sand, the waves crashing steadily under the sunset, Hector felt his spirit lighten despite his body's exhaustion. "The watch you gave me," he said, glancing at his wrist, "it's not just monitoring my health, is it?" Elon nodded. "It's collecting data, how your body responds to stress, medication, rest. Whether you try the therapy or not, you've already helped us get closer to better treatments." Hector fell silent, listening to the waves, then turned to Elon. "I'll do it," he said, his voice firm despite its weakness. "Not just for more time with Miguel, though that'd be wonderful, but for the others, those who might face what I'm going through." Elon placed a hand on his shoulder, squeezing lightly, his eyes shining with gratitude and respect. "Thank you," he said simply. That night, on the hotel balcony, Hector recounted everything to Valeria under a starlit sky. "Are you sure, Dad?" she asked, her voice thick with worry. If it doesn't work, I'll go knowing I tried my best," Hector replied gently. "And if it does—" He glanced through the glass, seeing Miguel excitedly recounting the day to Ruth. "I'll get to see that smile a little longer." Valeria wiped her tears, gripping his hand tightly, and in that moment they both felt the power of hope. Fragile, but enough to carry on. The dim glow of hospital ceiling lights cast a soft haze over the stark white corridor, where Valeria Ramirez paced back and forth, her hands clenched together as if trying to hold on to the last scraps of calm she had left. Inside the ICU room, Hector Ramirez lay on the bed, his body surrounded by wires and tubes, the steady beep of machines, a cold reminder that his time was slipping away second by second. Just hours ago, he'd been sitting in the Tesla Model 3 with Miguel, smiling at his grandson's joy. But now a sudden, searing pain in his chest had plunged him into a crisis he hadn't foreseen. That pain, sharp and ferocious, had brought him to his knees in the hotel room, shattering the fragile hope his family had only just begun to nurture. Hector's eyes fluttered open, his vision blurred by pain and medication, but he still made out the shape of Tomas, his nurse, adjusting the oxygen tube beside him. "Mr. Ramirez, try to stay calm," Tomas said, his voice urgent, yet gentle, his hands deftly checking the monitor. Hector wanted to respond, but his breathing was heavy, each inhale dragging a fire through his chest. He heard Valeria's voice in the hallway, breaking with worry as she spoke to someone, likely a doctor. Then, through the fog of his consciousness, he caught the small, trembling call of Miguel. "Grandpa." In the waiting room, Miguel sat motionless on a chair, his eyes red, but no longer shedding tears. He gripped Ruth's hand tightly, the neighbor who was trying to comfort him with soft whispers. "He's strong, Miguel," Ruth said, her voice wavering despite her attempt at optimism. "He won't give up that easily." But Miguel didn't reply, his gaze fixed on his shoes, as if shrinking into himself to avoid the terror screaming inside. That his grandpa, his hero, might not make it. Elon Musk stepped into the waiting room, a stark contrast to his usual self. His shirt wrinkled, hair disheveled, eyes sunken from lack of sleep. He'd rushed over from Tesla headquarters after a call from Lydia, his assistant, and his face now mirrored both worry and determination. "How is he?" he asked Valeria, his voice rough with strain. She turned, her eyes brimming with tears. "They're trying to stabilize him. His lung partially collapsed from fluid pressure caused by the cancer. They've inserted a tube, but—" Her voice broke, unable to finish. Elon nodded, his hands sliding into his pockets as if to suppress a sense of helplessness. He knelt in front of Miguel, his gaze soft but earnest. "Your grandpa's tough, Miguel," he said, his voice low but steady. He's fighting with everything he's got. Miguel looked up, his eyes meeting Elon's, and asked in a voice as faint as a breeze, "Is he going to die?" Elon didn't dodge the question or offer empty comfort. "I don't know," he replied, his honesty a lifeline pulling Miguel from silent dread. "But I know everyone here is doing their best to help him." A surgeon emerged from the ICU, his pale blue scrubs rumpled from hours of intense work. "Ramirez family?" he called. Valeria rushed forward, her voice frantic. "Yes, how's my dad?" "We've stabilized him for now," the doctor explained, his tone calm but unable to mask the gravity. "The lung collapsed due to fluid pressure from the progressing cancer. We've inserted a tube to drain it and reinflate the lung. He's awake, but very weak." "Can we see him?" Valeria asked, almost pleading. "Only family and just for a few minutes. He needs rest." Elon stood, pulling from his pocket the small wooden box he'd given Hector earlier, still sitting on the hotel bedside table when the crisis hit. "You should take this," he said, handing it to Valeria. "He might want it." She took it, her eyes confused, but with no time to question further. Inside the ICU, Hector lay pale beneath an oxygen mask, but his eyes lit up when Valeria and Miguel entered. "There you are," he whispered, his voice faint but full of love. Valeria grasped his hand, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Don't talk, Dad. Save your strength." Miguel stood at the foot of the bed, his hands clutching the blanket's edge, his eyes flickering between fear and a desire to be strong like his grandpa had always taught him. Hector managed a weak smile, beckoning Miguel closer with a shaky wave. "Come here, mijo," he called. Miguel stepped forward, his legs trembling, and when he reached Hector's side, the old man squeezed his hand lightly. "Sorry about our day," he said, his voice catching. "It's okay, Grandpa," Miguel replied, trying to sound brave. "We'll go driving again when you're better." Hector nodded, but his eyes betrayed that he didn't believe it. Valeria remembered the box in her hand and held it out. "Mr. Musk sent this for you," she said. Hector's gaze fell on it, a spark of recognition flaring in his eyes. "The box? Yes," he murmured, then glanced around. "I think it's time to open it." A nurse appeared at the door, her voice firm. "I'm sorry, but the doctor needs to check him now. You all need to leave." "Wait," Hector said, his voice suddenly stronger, summoning a final surge of will. "Everyone needs to be here. Elon, too." "For the box." The nurse hesitated, but the resolve in Hector's eyes made her pause. "I'll get the doctor," she said, then left. Hector gestured to Miguel. "Go find Elon, mijo. This box is for everyone." Miguel nodded and darted out, returning minutes later with Elon, Lydia, Ruth, and Dr. Harrison. The cramped ICU room suddenly felt warm with the presence of those who cared for Hector. Valeria handed the box to her father, but his hands were too weak to lift the lid. "You open it, Miguel," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "It's really for you." Miguel carefully lifted the lid, revealing a small USB drive etched with the Tesla logo and a folded letter. "Read it," Hector told Valeria. She unfolded the paper, her voice trembling as she read aloud. "To Mr. Ramirez, what you hold is the result of 5 years of research. The complete data on our experimental cancer treatment therapy. I've arranged for this research to be given to cancer research centers worldwide, on the condition that when perfected, it's free to anyone who needs it. This fund will bear the name Hector Ramirez Cancer Research Fund. Whether this therapy extends your life by days or years, your legacy will live on in those it saves. With deep respect, Elon Musk." The room fell silent, save for the steady hum of machines. Valeria sobbed, looking at her father. "Do you understand, Dad? What this means?" Hector nodded faintly. "It means Miguel will have something to be proud of," he said, his eyes seeking his grandson. "My name will help people." Dr. Harrison stepped forward. "There's more. Early results from your blood show the therapy's working. Your cancer cells are responding." "So he could get better?" Miguel asked, his voice brightening with hope. "Not certain," Harrison replied cautiously. "But he might have more time." "More time," Hector whispered, his eyes misting with emotion. "That's all I wanted." Elon approached, his voice low but firm. "The fund will be set up immediately. I've seeded it with $20 million to start." Hector shook his head weakly. "Too much? Not enough for what you've given us," Elon countered, his eyes gleaming with gratitude. As everyone filed out, Miguel lingered, holding his grandpa's hand. "I'll be back soon, okay?" he asked. "I'll wait," Hector promised, squeezing his hand. In that moment, amid the machines and cold light, Hector felt peace, not just for surviving, but for leaving something eternal behind. The gentle spring sunlight streamed through the windows of a Boston high school, where Miguel Ramirez stood beside his homemade solar energy system model at the science fair. The 13-year-old wore a faded Science Museum t-shirt, his small hands gripping a microphone tightly, his clear, confident voice ringing out among the crowd of students, teachers, and parents. "I'm Miguel Ramirez," he began, his eyes sparkling with passion. "My project is called Home Energy Independence, How Solar Power Can Change the World." But he gestured to the model, a miniature house with solar panels, a battery pack, and flickering LED lights, his heart racing with excitement as he explained how it worked. In the front row, Hector Ramirez sat quietly, his body far frailer than it had been 6 months ago, but his eyes shone with an unmistakable pride. The small oxygen tank beside him hissed softly with each breath, a reminder that cancer still clung to him. But today, he wasn't thinking about death. He was thinking about Miguel, the boy he'd thought he wouldn't live to see grow up, now standing there, strong and brilliant, carrying forward the dreams Hector had placed his faith in. 6 months ago, doctors had given him mere weeks, but Elon Musk's experimental therapy had granted him time, not forever, but enough to witness this day. As Miguel wrapped up his technical explanation, he paused, took a deep breath, and his voice softened, brimming with emotion. "This project is special to me because of my grandpa," he said, his gaze shifting to Hector. A student's camera in the crowd pivoted, capturing Hector, his thinning white hair, his faint but warm smile. 6 months ago, he had cancer and was about to die. But then a miracle happened. He met someone who changed everything. Hector felt his throat tighten as Miguel stepped off the stage, reaching out to invite him up. The crowd applauded, and he rose slowly, his trembling hands gripping the cane. Tomas, his nurse, had left beside him before stepping away to give him this moment with his family. Miguel supported him, and as they stood together on the stage, Hector took the microphone, his raspy voice stronger than he'd expected. "I'm Hector Ramirez," he began, his eyes sweeping the audience. "Last year, doctors gave me less than 6 months to live. Today, I'm still here, thanks to an experimental therapy developed by scientists and funded by Elon Musk." He pointed to the screen behind him, where Miguel displayed images of his lungs before and after treatment. The tumors significantly smaller, though not gone. "I'm not fully cured," he said, his honesty silencing the crowd. "But I've had more time. Time to watch my grandson grow. Time to help others." He rested a hand on Miguel's shoulder, feeling the boy's youthful strength beneath his palm, his heart swelling with a gratitude he couldn't put into words. The science fair video went viral on social media, racking up millions of views in days. Follow-up scenes showed Hector and Miguel installing solar panels on a neighbor's roof, planting trees in a community garden, and driving the metallic blue Tesla Model 3 to visit cancer patients at a local hospital. Miguel's voiceover rang out. "Doctors say Grandpa's cancer might come back stronger someday. This therapy isn't a permanent cure. But every day we have together is a gift," Hector added, his tone warm and steady. "And every day is a chance to make a difference." In Phoenix, Valeria sat in her father's small home, watching the video for the 10th time on her tablet. Tears rolled down her cheeks, not from sadness, but from pride and gratitude. 6 months ago, she'd thought she'd lose her dad, but now he was here, not just surviving but inspiring millions. She recalled the hospital moment when the wooden box was opened, and how her father smiled, knowing his name would be tied to the Hector Ramirez Cancer Research Fund. That fund now supported research in 5 countries, each breakthrough bearing the mark of the courage he'd shown by agreeing to the trial. At Tesla's California headquarters, Elon Musk sat in his office, the viral video playing on his computer screen. He didn't smile, but his eyes glinted with a rare emotion, satisfaction mixed with contemplation. He remembered meeting Hector at the showroom, how the man's patience and love for Miguel had touched him. As the press hounded him for comments, Tesla issued a brief statement. Mr. Musk considers his friendship with the Ramirez family a personal matter. But on social media, Elon posted a simple update. Hector's courage made this happen. I just provided the chance. The video's final scene returned to the Tesla showroom in Phoenix, where it all began. Hector and Miguel walked in, his wheelchair rolling silently across the polished floor. Derek, the employee who'd once been rude to Hector, recognized him instantly, his face flushing with shame. But Hector smiled, waving at him like an old friend. My grandson wants to learn how to maintain a Tesla, he said, his voice gentle but firm. Derek nodded, stammering an apology, and led them to the service area. As they chatted, Hector noticed an elderly woman at the reception desk, ignored just as he'd been 6 months earlier. Without hesitation, he excused himself, wheeling over to her. Hello, he said warmly. I'm Hector. Do you need help? The camera captured the moment, his genuine kindness, free of bitterness despite all he'd endured. The woman smiled, grateful, and Hector stayed to assist her while Miguel explored with Derek. The video closed with Hector and Miguel stepping out of the showroom, the sunset stretching behind them, their silhouettes blending into the golden-orange light. Miguel's voice rang out one last time. Every day we have is a gift. Hector added, and a chance to make a difference. Social media erupted, comments about kindness, resilience, and the power of family love flooding the internet. At home, Hector sat in his armchair. Miguel sprawled beside him, both watching the video on Valeria's phone. You're famous now, mijo, Hector teased, his voice raspy but cheerful. Miguel laughed. No, Grandpa, you're the famous one. They're calling you the cancer hero. Hector shook his head, resting a hand on the boy's head. No, we're a team, and you're the future I always believed in. Valeria walked in, bringing her father a cup of tea. Are you tired, Dad? She asked, her eyes tinged with concern. A little, Hector repeated, but his smile didn't fade. But today was worth every second. He glanced out the window, where the moonlight began to rise, and felt peace. The cancer might return, but he wasn't afraid anymore. He'd lived long enough to see Miguel shine, to know his name would endure in efforts to save others. And that, for him, was enough.
The sun hits the glass, a showroom so bright, polished reflections, a future in sight. But in the shadows, a quiet man stands, faded blue jeans, no wealth in his hands. He walks through the doors, just a dream in his eyes, a promise to keep, no space for goodbyes. But the world only sees what the pockets can pay, and the dream starts slipping away. Every day is a gift, every moment a chance to change someone's world with a touch, with a glance. Not measured in money, not weighed down in gold, but in love that we give and the stories we hold. A voice calls out through the whispering crowd, "Sir, do you need help?" So gentle, so loud, not knowing the way, the hope in his chest, or the time slipping fast like the sun in the west. A hand meets another, a firm steady shake, two different worlds, one vow they both make. A ride in a car, a future so bright, for a boy who believes in the stars in the night. Every day is a gift, every moment a chance to change someone's world with a touch, with a glance. Not measured in money, not weighed down in gold, but in love that we give and the stories we hold. And when the sun sets on the road we have walked, will our voices be heard in the lives that we've touched? It's not in the cars or the power we claim, but the kindness we leave, the echo of names. Now a name on a fund, a future secured, a hope that was fading, but now it endures. A boy stands tall, builds light from the sun, carrying the dream that his grandpa begun. Every day day's a gift, every moment a choice to stand up for others, to give them a voice. Not measured in riches, but in hearts that we've swayed, in the lives that we lift and the love that we've made. The sun hits the glass, a reflection so clear of a man who once stood with a dream held so near, and a boy in his footsteps with hope in his chest, carrying